Okay, I will start my presentation. I'm going to be speaking tonight my time, I'm in Australia, on education innovation. My name is Paul Abbott and I'm the Academic Director of the Wolfram Summer School. So for the last 6 years, we've had an educational innovation track at the Wolfram Summer School. And I am advertising this as, I think, a really great place to develop and implement educational innovation. And my reasons for thinking this and believing this is that you get mentoring from experts and Wolfram Research developers. What I love about the school and the educational innovation track at the school is the shared experience, and in particular for making educational technologies. One of the best things about the school for many of the participants is that Stephen Wolfram himself is actively involved, and he reviews all of the projects and gives feedback on them. You also get feedback from and interaction with other like-minded educators. This year there was 11 people in the educational innovation track. I'll just call it EDU for short, or EDU track. And it would have been better in person, but nevertheless, there was still quite a lot of interaction between those educators. I'll talk more about later about how the school has been changed in its format this year compared to previous years. But one thing that the school has always had as its format is that it's an intensive, hands-on, 3-week format. So basically the school runs for 3 weeks. There's also a week 0 for the physics track attendees, but for the other tracks, it's basically just a very intensive program. And importantly, for some of the attendees, it has a lot of training on Wolfram Language technology. Some educators don't need so much knowledge of the whole Wolfram technology stack. Others need a lot of it, so it's useful having that training. There are many lectures devoted to educational innovation. Lectures, for example, on computational thinking. And there is assistance to quickly develop tools from Wolfram technology staff, from Wolfram Research staff who are experts at the technology. So you can quickly get things done when you have an idea. And the goal of the projects is to focus on changing the way people learn and teach. I mean, we've all been through the same sorts of systems for so long, and much of education has not really adjusted to the fact that there are wonderful technologies out there that we can use to change the way students learn and people teach. So to give you an idea about what is produced at the Wolfram Summer School, so let me just switch to this. So this is the homepage for the Wolfram Summer School. As you can see, it's been running for almost 20 years. And I should just mention down the bottom here that there are other programs that some of the people attending this session may be interested to know about. There's a Wolfram Gap Year research program. And in particular, I'll also mention a little bit about the Wolfram High School Summer Camp, which runs in parallel to the Wolfram Summer School. So just to browse a little bit more, there are essentially 4 tracks each year at the Wolfram Summer School: physics, which is the new Wolfram Physics project. There's a science stream, a technology and innovation stream, and an educational innovation stream. So these are the streams there. At the end of your project at the Wolfram Summer School, you have to submit your notebook to the Wolfram community. And if I just open this, you can actually have a look at all outputs from all of the tracks is on Tumblr. So if I've already got that, it's not that one, it's this one. So this is a Tumblr stream of the projects, all the projects, and you can quickly glance through and find things that you're interested in. You can load more posts. But by doing a search, you can just narrow that down to the educational innovation outputs. And I've already loaded that just so it doesn't take extra time. So these were the educational innovation projects from last year, and I won't read them out there. I'll just mention that I know Garrett Dubovsky is attending or virtually attending the school, sorry, the virtual technology conference, and talking about his project in particular. But these were a few of these were the other projects from the educational innovation track, which you can look through, and by clicking on these, you can read more about them. So there's Tumblr. At this conference, there are education sessions. So if you click on anything that has the Future of Education banner, for example, my presentation has the Future of Education banner. Well, if you click on that, that will take you to all sessions that have the Future of Education banner. And so there was a bunch of presentations here, which were all related to the future of education. So, and it depends on what you're interested in. It might be higher education, it might be K-12 education, it might be a particular topic like mathematics or chemistry, it might be something like STEM. So there are several presentations, which many of you have already attended, I'm sure, or downloaded the notebooks for. But for example, there was also a presentation on the Wolfram High School summer camp projects. There's my presentation now, and there are some other related sessions. So that's the education sessions. There's also, as I mentioned, poster sessions, and if you go to the poster sessions, they're running, there's some more running there. And I noticed, as I said, that Gary Dubovsky is one of the people presenting at that. So, okay. And the outputs from the Wolfram Summer School, one way of distributing them is as a post to Wolfram Community. So if you're not a member of the Wolfram Community, I think you should be. It's a great forum, and it's definitely a tremendous resource. But in particular, it's an excellent resource for educational innovation because there are many educators on the Wolfram Community, and many very useful comments are made on questions related to education data. So if you go to, I'll just come back here, I've just searched on the Wolfram Community for a list related to education posts. This is related to, so I searched for Wolfram Summer School and filtered by education. And so you can have a look back over the years at all of the presentations with those tags there, including in 2020 and 2021, but going back over the years. And so you can review all of those presentations. So to do educational innovation, there are a bunch of resources, and you need these resources. Well, as I mentioned here, developing courses from scratch, and I've done this a number of times, it really is a long process. Historically, you'd have a textbook, and you would select the textbook, select notes from that textbook, develop assignments and materials. But with technology, there are many other approaches you can take. And so I think it's important that you use tools that make your task as easy as possible. And let me just give a few examples here. There is the Wolfram Education webpage, gives you an overview of the Wolfram technology stack. Of course, there's the Wolfram demonstration site. What I have found and what I used myself is many times when I wanted to demonstrate something or include something into my notes for a particular topic, there was already a demonstration of that particular topic. Let's say Coulomb's law, something else in electromagnetism, something in quantum mechanics. So as a physicist, I particularly focused on those, and there were many, many more demonstrations in mathematics. At various levels, getting people to think computationally. Well, there's the computational thinking initiatives, which is worth visiting. Of course, Wolfram Alpha is pretty much integrated into Mathematica and Wolfram Language now, and there's a tighter integration between them. But you can also just use the website. That in itself is very useful. MathWorld is a tremendous resource for mathematics, of course. What many people perhaps do not know is that MathWorld includes, many of the pages include notebooks, and so sometimes you can just download those as a resource. There's also many courses on Wolfram U, so let me just perhaps pick out. So if you follow that link, it'll take you to Wolfram U, and you can look through courses that are already there. And there are many, many courses already there that you can follow. So I'm just showing a few more. And in particular, if you scroll down here, you will find that, or if you just go to the Wolfram U site, that there are recordings from previous summer schools of the sessions in 2017 and 2018 at least.
Excuse me, Paul.
And there was, yes.
You're only sharing your notebook, so when you click on links, it won't show the web browser. You would have to share your whole screen for it to catch the web browser.
Okay, thank you for that. It's how can I add that? So I just add a new share.
Yep, and then just click the entire desktop one. If
desktop one, can I share that? Okay. So is that, so if I flip, is that's changing now?
Yep, there you go.
Okay, so apologies for that. I was, let me just quickly revise it so I'll have time. The first thing I showed was the Wolfram Summer School page and the courses there, or the tracks there in physics, science, technology and innovation, so on. There is some particular information on the Wolfram Educational Innovation track, and what I just went, what I should have indicated before, but thanks to Ed, so I'm back here anyway, so I can do this. Basically, the structure of the school is outlined there. So what happens in the first week of the school, what happens in the second week of the school, and what happens in the third week of the school are outlined. The third thing I showed was the Tumblr posts of projects from the Wolfram Summer School. The link from my notebook will take you here, but this gives you a summary of very visual and interactive summary of the presentations, and you can follow any of these links, which will take you to the Wolfram Community page. In particular, these were the projects from the Wolfram Summer School this year with educational innovation. And so you can follow any of these links to take you to more on those presentations. I also mentioned that within the Pathable for the Wolfram Technology Conference, there are those posts or those topics that have Future of Education as a banner. If you click on that banner, you'll get all of them. And so these were the ones that it is worth doing. And if there's a particular topic also that you're interested in, such as, say, K-12 education, if you click on that, I'm not sure that everyone's realised this in Pathwell, it's a nice little feature. That didn't work. It's taken me what I was expecting. But as I said, if you click on this tab, the Future of Education, you can go to all of those with that banner. So let me just skip away, back a page. Okay. So it's taking a little while to refresh, which is one reason that I didn't do those live. So I was mentioning in particular the Wolfram U courses. So I will just come back to that page. Let me firstly cover the fact that the Wolfram Community, if you search for WSS, which is the shorthand for the Wolfram Summer School, and education, you get up all of the educational innovation posts there, so you can have a look at any of those from the last few years, and there's 3 pages of those to have a look through. I mentioned next Wolfram U, and you can have a look here at courses that are available. One thing I did mention is that you can search on Wolfram U and you will find that there are recordings from the previous 2 from 2 of the previous Wolfram Summer Schools complete, are also on Wolfram U. Back to my notebook. Okay, so my topic here is useful resources. We've talked about Wolfram U courses. There's also, of course, the Wolfram function repository, something I've only just contributed to 1 or 2 functions myself, but some people have noticed one of the innovators, I think, contributed 100 of them. So it's a very useful resource, and many of the times you will find what you want on the Wolfram function repository. There's also a number of books, which particularly for educators, still in many disciplines, the standard approach. So let me just go to the, that was, by the way, it's the Wolfram function repository, which I'm sure you've all seen. But if you go to Wolfram books, you find a number of books which will be interesting for you to have a look at. And I'm just scroll down, and many see them, teaching Fourier transforms, for example, introduction to statistics, many topics. Some are new, some are old, but I just wanted to focus on 2 books. So I mentioned, just avoid that, mention 2. As I said, my research and teaching is in the area of physics, and 2 of the books, recent books that I just want to focus on, one's on quantum mechanics and one is on electrodynamics. And let me just jump to that. So the book on electrodynamics was very recently announced. It's a 2021 book, and it is in the Wolfram Library, and you can have a look at that. There was a post, I saw it, I think first on LinkedIn, which showed examples from the chapters of this book. And I noticed that Kevin Rice here, who may be attending the conference, was an undergraduate at, I think, Boston University working on this project. But I had a look at, if you look at the sample material from this book, I won't do that now, but I invite you to do so. There are some very, very nice examples of using Wolfram technologies for teaching electrodynamics. And, I thought this was, I used to teach electromagnetism to undergraduate students, and I did something similar to this, but I think this is a much more comprehensive project than the one I undertook. The other book that I just want to select is the book on quantum mechanics, a student's manual. I picked this because if you scroll to the top, well, actually, I'm just going to open it up in Adobe Acrobat. Well, actually, I'll switch back here and I will just open right at the top. So this was the book. It's available from that link, and if you see, it's actually an archive link, so you can download the PDF. And Roman Schmid was the author of that book, and I invited him as one of the presenters to this year's Wolfram Summer School, and he talked about the making of this book in particular, because although it's a book on quantum mechanics, many of the ideas he used in this book are, I think, of more general interest. And in particular, if I jump into Acrobat, his book is, as anyone in physics would expect, beautifully typeset. But what is key is there is a lot of Wolfram language buried into the book. Now, you might think, oh, well, it's inactive. This is a PDF. But what you will also notice is that there are a number of code buttons within this book. So if you like, it's a standard textbook, except if you click on the code, the notebook pops up and you have an interactive notebook that you can work through. And I think this is a good compromise. You can do everything within Wolfram language and within notebooks, but many people and many educators still feel more comfortable with fairly standard or more standard resources. This is a nice compromise. It's a standard PDF, beautifully formatted. It's got Wolfram language code in the book, but that's of course static and inactive because it's a PDF produced from tech, but there has links to notebooks which you can open up. So I think that's a very nice compromise. So that was the reason that I picked that book. Just scrolling further down, I've also got a link on education partnerships, which I'm not going to open up at the moment. Well, that's not wanted. So some useful resources, and I think I covered all of those, yes. So the next thing I just wanted to mention was what do the students think of the school? And I haven't asked, well, I've interacted with them, but I got some comments from students from previous years. The first of those was a student that I mentored, Carlos Arango from Colombia, and what he said in his comments, he liked the academic environment, and there was a great diversity of topics covered in the lecture presentations. He mentioned, and I think this is worth mentioning, that it is a lot of work. But I think the fact is, and I think this is true in my experience very much, people are excited about doing the work. They're excited about sharing the presentation. So it's a very good environment. I should just add that the summer school, the numbers there are normally about 100 people. About 30 of them are Wolfram staff, and 70 of them are, if you like, students. So it's a very, everyone there has a common theme or a common thread to what they're doing, which is Wolfram language. And so it's just a great environment to work in. And Carlos, learned a lot about mathematics, established context and so on, context. But the other thing I know is that he's been using it in Colombia, and another one of the students at the school, another contact I have, has also come through from Colombia due to promotion by Carlos. Now, some of you, many of you, I'm sure, will recognize this name. Mads was also formerly a summer school attendee, and I think some of his comments were very useful. He didn't mind returning to dorm lifestyle. In fact, I didn't mind it either. It was pretty good. And I think this was the other key, if you like. It was an international community of Wolfram language coders there, so that was quite exciting. He improved his coding skill, as he definitely did. But I think the key point for Mads, and I know this to be true, it opened a new door horizon in his life. As many of you know, he now works for Wolfram Research, so I think it definitely did change what he wanted to do, and I'm sure he can talk to more length about that, but I think that was one of the very positive outcomes from the school. And the third person I've selected, Alison, who Flip Phillips mentored, but I was also involved with towards the end of that project. And Alison was one of the speakers here at this conference. You know, enjoyed it. I know that this is true. She really was committed to the school, and you know, and I think this is the one question: what did she want to get out of the school? And she thought through that. And I know Alison was working on a book, and so she had a clear focus and intent about what she wanted to do. Well, this is nice, and it is true. I know they got on very well, and you know, I think the interactions regular with Stephen make it's always exciting. It's never boring. There's always something interesting going on. I think this. I won't read all of this, but perhaps it's worth reading. It was a very exciting process where lots of things were communicated very quickly. So that was the second point. And the third one is, you know, what did you get out of it? Well, I think the point is, I know from interactions with Alison since the school that she is still learning from it. And she's met interesting people as a result of that school and the connections that were established. So I won't focus on the rest of that, but then you can all read those on time. So in other words, I just want to say I picked three here that I contacted, but I would argue or expect that the feedback from most students would be along the same lines. Basically, it's a fun experience, it's an exciting experience, it's hard work, but it can be life-changing, and you get a lot out of the school. So you know, it's fun. I think that's the bottom line. It's fun learning, and I've certainly enjoyed my involvement with the school. Okay, as I said, the EDU track's been running for about 6 years, but this year we made a number of changes. What did we change for the EDU track? Well, I tried to get speakers to present more of an overview of the Wolfram technology stack with a focus on education. So there were a few of the presentations this year that covered that. And while it is absolutely important that we be aware of the range of what you can do with the Wolfram language, for educators, some of the topics, perhaps image processing, perhaps signal processing, perhaps neural networks, aren't so relevant. They're interesting and you might want to know more about them, but making them compulsory wasn't necessarily the best way. So we removed the compulsory requirements. We like, you know, students were meant to attend every session on every topic. And I think that in such an intense environment, that can be unproductive. And also the course materials and the lectures are available online after the schools. So, and they eventually become parts of Wolfram U. So, you know, you can learn those things in your own time. Whereas in 3 weeks, and you're trying to work on a project, it can be overwhelming to cover so much material. So that was 2 of the changes we made. This year, for a couple of reasons, I called upon several colleagues and contacts to help make the EDU track possible. One of the reasons is, unfortunately, David Van Owen became unavailable late stage, and he was going to be a mentor for many of the students, because normally mentors take on about 5 students. And so it's an intense process for the mentors as well. But this year we had new mentors, Clayton Schockweiler, who supervised Garrett Dubowski. I won't mention the other names and projects. The posts on the Wolfram Community will tell you about that. But other long-term friends and colleagues, Phil Ramsden, he's another guy, Seth Chandler, were also invited as mentors, and I'm glad they accepted. I hope that there's more I can do for them to thank them for what they did. Craig Carter at MIT, but he was in France at the time, was very active participant, very helpful to me. and I really enjoyed his involvement. And this year there was a new direction, was to involve, in this case, Ankit Naik, who is an expert on system modeler, because we'd not had people in the EDU track do system modeler projects before. So that was the next mentor that was very useful to me. And again, I'd just like to say this again, I'd like to thank them all for their assistance in mentoring the students, and they all did an excellent job. Okay, as in 2020, because of COVID, the school was virtual. Now, I know Danielle can correct me if she's listening too, but hopefully the school returned to Bentley University in 2022, at least in a hybrid mode. So we may have some virtual and some in-person attendees. And my reason for that, my personal reason is, well, I missed the closer engagement connection that arises in the in-person mode. What I found myself was I would get up and go to breakfast, and I'd meet somebody and have a chat. Then we'd go off for some sessions, and then we'd come back and have lunch, and I'd sit with different people and discuss with them what they were doing. And each day you would have, by the end of the school, you would have met everybody. You would know what they're doing, what their interests are, what their interests outside the school were. And I think that was a very important thing. Now, you can do some of that in a virtual environment, but I would argue, at least for me, it's harder. I found it less fulfilling. So hopefully, as I said, next year we will have at least a hybrid mode. And there are still changes that I would like to include in future schools. Not just Wolfram Language tools here, but what is the full digital education landscape? And many of the attendees at the school can help explain what is going on in that landscape, but we can also bring in experts to talk on various aspects of that. And one thing that we haven't really addressed is technological, pedagogical content knowledge, things that can be useful for educators in addition to just providing technology. Wolfram Language and Wolfram technology stack is the best tool, but how do you best present that tool in a wide variety of environments? So just a few more comments. Let's see how my time's going. It's going pretty well. Many of you have been are in education, and many of you have been in education for a long time. It really is hard to be innovative in education. I think there's several reasons for that. One is actual real innovation, real change is just not easy. And there's a number of reasons that, so I'll address a few of those below. One sometimes is the cost of the technology, the tools. Another might be the infrastructure, the hardware and software, the networks that are required to make access to the technology work properly. One thing that I was very thankful for is that in my own educational institution, I had heads of school in my department of physics who supported every idea pretty much that I had. And sometimes that was with financial support. Other times it was with the support of people or lab technicians or whatever was required to enable these sorts of innovations. And if you don't have that support and you're doing it by yourself, it's very hard. One other thing I would say is, as I said, my heads of school were on board, but convincing others that what you're trying to do is a good idea is not always easy. And in particular, what we were doing in my case in the School of Physics, the School of Mathematics was somewhat interested in this. School of Engineering was initially less so, but became a big fan. But it took a while to convince people, and a good example of that is just in my own experience. My next door neighbour was a string theorist, and he was from the old school, and he just didn't like tools like language. His student kept coming to see me for some of the calculations he was trying to do, and we worked through Wolfram Language solutions to those problems. And it took about a year for me to convince my colleague, Sergey, that this was a good idea. And eventually he goes, I can see this tool is actually useful, but it takes a while sometimes. Right, the next comment is immersive use of technology. You can follow that link. It's a video from a presentation or recorded from myself several years ago, where I was using it in my electromagnetism course. But arranging for that to work can be difficult. And I use the word immersive there. What I mean was, you can just run normal lecture courses, if you like, talk at a whiteboard and so on. It could be an electronic whiteboard. But if you try and immerse the students in the technology, so in fact, I was using it in my lectures, in my lab classes, and particularly in my exams. All of my exams for my computational physics course, and particularly for my applied mathematics course, were done in a computer laboratory. And there's technical issues in running those, but not only that, you've got to get support from other staff that this is a good idea and reasonable idea. And so that I realize can be difficult. I don't know that I have any sort of secret tips. It took me a long time to get it to work. And I have some questions there. What is the best way of implementing computational thinking in education? I'll just make one comment here. Mads sent me a while back a paper. I think it was an archive link to a group. It might have been, I think it's in Michigan, one of the universities in Michigan, that was using, had decided to use, computational essays to, as part of an engineering course. And I read the paper and I didn't find that their particular take on the subject was that innovative or exciting. And we were discussing, what ways can you communicate to people like this who are obviously trying new things, that there is if you like, an even better way of doing things. And what I thought about that, just recently I came to the conclusion, what you do is you just show them the stuff on the Tumblr thread. You show them what high school kids can do in 2 weeks if you give them the right tools and the right training. And if you can't be convinced by that, you will never be convinced. I think that there are better ways, and the Wolfram Technology Stack provides a lot of ways to do this. There are better ways of implementing computational thinking in education. And so I just make some comments on that. And I'm getting close to the end of my presentation, because even though I'm not anywhere near over time, which is good, I just wanted to say one thing and then ask for feedback. And so, if you're interested, please apply to attend the Wolfram Summer School. I really hope that many of the educators who are keen on using Wolfram technologies will come, and even ones who want to learn more about it. It's a great venue for that. And I'm going to be switching to have a look at the chat link on Pathable in a second. But, feedback, comments and suggestions are all welcome. You can email me, and I'll also have a look at what's on that chat link. I'll repeat the questions there and just have a look there. Some comments from Nicholas. It is interesting, has COVID made the change? My own view is that many people feel, were forced into changing. Some people are very uncomfortable about that, but I think it was an important change. Andreas makes a good point that different systems have different issues. I've spent some time in Japan and some time in Taiwan and some time in Indonesia, so I have seen how their education system works a little bit, and some of the ideas that I have and would like to do would be very difficult to implement, particularly from my experience in Indonesia, but on a small scale, I did try out some programs there. Now, I noticed that Phil and Craig are here. Thank you for the comments. So that's a good question from Bob. What additional tools would be most useful? Well, I'm going to have to think about that question. I'm going to copy that and just paste it over here so I come back to it. Yes, so Theris, I've been in contact with you. Yes, I enjoyed your project too, and we've sort of been keeping in touch since then, which is really good. Craig makes a good question here. How do you imagine the hybrid summer school to work? That's a good question. I think that we'll have to go through the logistics of that, and I think, Craig, since you're involved this year, you might have some good ideas, and same for Phil there. In one of the major issues that we found, and this was particularly affected myself, was that time differences. The school nominally was running from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern summertime, I think, and that was basically 12 or 13 hours difference from me. So it was very difficult. That is an issue to work through. One of the ideas or potential solutions, which I did to some extent, was to have mentors that were geographically in similar time zones, for example. So Phil mentored Annalaiga, and they're almost 1 or 2 hours time difference. It wasn't too bad. Craig, you were in France at the time, so that was 5 or 6 hours, which is not ideal, I know. But if you have people who work late or work early, sometimes it can still be made to work. I imagine what will happen is that the school in Boston will still run, essentially morning lectures, and the expectation that people will work from sometime in the window 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and the international people will, have to fit in with that. But with external mentors as well, maybe that will still be practical. So, okay. So that's so I think I won't. I'll have to think about Andreas's question. I mean, our goal is to be that the summer school should work for everybody, and we've had attendees from. In fact, Stephen would bring up a globe and say where all the attendees come from, and I think each year there's a post which explains, or tries to geographically, using the geographics, showing where everybody's from. So I'd say that the summer school is designed to be a global school, but certainly for the educational innovation track, where many of the people are coming from education systems in a range of countries, there is no one size fits all for the school to actually make it work with different education systems. And saying, oh, you should just change your system is often not the right answer, because it's impossible, or it takes a generation to make such change. However, I think COVID, I've noticed with my own children, for example, that one of the changes was, and they were quite happy to adjust to this change, is that with more online lecturing, and they were just using online tools from anywhere. So that could be, excellent YouTube lectures, a whole range of topics, Coursera, etc. And so what it actually meant was that many schools, in any country, could also use those tools. And I've often wondered, being a teacher formerly myself, is, should we sometimes give up our passion to lecture on all topics and just lecture on the topics that we're a specialist at, and let particularly for the general topics, there are some educators who are just far better at presenting them, and with the right tools, our students can learn, the background material and the material that they require for a particular course better than if we try and cover it ourselves. So, I mean, certainly the goal of the school is to be a global strategy, but recognising that local education, there is issues with different education systems around the world. Now, Anit's question, it's a good question. I don't know that I have a direct answer to that. I guess I would argue my own view and what I have seen during COVID is I'm not such a believer that in-person education is better and that remote is bad. In fact, I've often thought the other way around. For example, the courses that I gave, starting with computational physics in the 1990s, I could have run them not just at my institution, but essentially globally, because the lectures were recorded, the notebooks were available, and all the materials were electronic. So, and I expect that there's other people on this thread that would also have the same view. But there are issues that particular universities or particular schools have strong views on what is acceptable and what is not. I'll have to take this sort of question on notice and come back to you about, what can you do, and perhaps also to answer, I think it was Bob's question on the thread as well. Yeah, it was Bob's question. What other tools might we want to use? So I've copied those questions down and I will think about them. Okay, well, I will conclude then at this time, unless anybody has any input that they want to give. Thank you for your comments. Please email me if you want to have a further dialogue on this. I will post either on Pathable or on Rocket Chat some comments in response to the questions here, but some I need to think a little bit about, and input from others, such as Bob's question. What do we really need, particularly for educational innovation? Comments from people from different countries on what sort of issues that you're facing. Even though, as I said, the goal of the school is to be inclusive and to be global, it may fail to do that. COVID has been useful in this one way, that it has made us think, made many more people think that we should change the way we teach certain subjects, or all subjects, in fact. And I think that's positive. But my fear is that with vaccination and after a while, people will just go back to the usual way. I see there's a bunch of threads there which I didn't capture. So yes, one of the most useful things about the school, apart from anything else, was for me is my own exposure to the situation in different countries, the different way that certain topics are taught, and the different way, the interactions that people have, and the difficulty with changing certain systems that people are very comfortable with. And I think that's something. Okay, well, we're almost at time now. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you for all those who've commented, and I will follow up with those comments, because I'm sure that they're all going to be useful. And some of you have been involved in the school, and having you as mentors for a future school would be very valuable. Others, educators, you've got a lot of experience, and you're also experienced with the Wolfram Language, and having you as a mentor might be something that you would like to do. As I said, I mean, this year our mentors were virtual, and in the educational track, as opposed to the other tracks, the mentors only had to look after one or maybe two students. And so it wasn't, it was a moderately heavy involvement, but it's not like actually being at school where you're doing 4 or 5 students, and that basically is taking up all the time. But I think, we will need and want and use virtual mentors as well as, in-house mentors next year. So I'm looking forward to talking to some of you about such an involvement, because I think that would be very good. Well, thank you all. I will conclude now and say, from me, say good night and join you in the rest of the conference.